In accordance with Section 5 of the Open Public Meetings Act, be advised that a notice of this meeting was made by posting on the bulletin board in Town Hall and forwarding to the officially designated newspapers that this meeting would take place at Town Hall at 7 p.m. on Tuesday, July 18th, 2023. Meeting details and the draft agenda were also posted on our Township website. Please all stand to salute the flag.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Cohen?
Here.
Ms. Purvis?
Here.
Ms. Romano?
Here.
Mr. Banayak? Mayor Miggins?
Here.
Thank you.
Approval of the agenda. Our township engineer recommends that ordinance 2644-23 titled Adoption of Flood Damage Prevention Ordinance be removed from the agenda this evening, seeing it requires additional review prior to introduction due to comments received by the Department of Environmental Protection. I hereby motion to remove from the agenda ordinance 2644-23 titled Adoption of Flood Damage Prevention Ordinance, which was scheduled for introduction this evening. May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? May I have a motion to approve the agenda as revised?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? May I have a motion to approve the May 2nd, 2023 Special Township Committee minutes?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions? May I have a motion to approve the June 20th, 2023 Township Committee minutes?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. May I have a motion to approve the June 20th, 2023 Special Township Committee minutes?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. So great news for us tonight. We have a promotion. So Chief Gilfetter, would you please provide some background on this? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. First tonight, I'd like to present Mark as a party, as a lieutenant. I'd like to thank the Township Committee, the mayor, and Mr. McDonald for allowing us to promote him to captain tonight. Mark was hired in Milburn, July 2001. He attended the 58th class of the Morris County Police Academy. Graduated in December of 2001 and was assigned to the Patrol Division. He worked as a patrol officer for 10 years, and in February 2012, he was promoted to the rank of sergeant. He was assigned as a supervisor in the Patrol Division for 3 years. In April of 2015, Lieutenant Azapardi was promoted to the rank of lieutenant. Lieutenant Azapardi is currently in charge of a domestic violence training. He's a liaison to the Township's domestic violence crisis team, and he's also the police department's accreditation manager. Tonight with Mark is his daughter, Ava, brother, John, sister-in-law, Maureen, niece and nephew, Lindsay and John, sister, Donna, husband, Andy, his girlfriend, Susanna, and her family.
Okay. May I have a motion to approve Resolution 23-186, which confirms this promotion?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Purvis?
Yes.
Ms. Romano?
Yes.
Mayor Miggins?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gaddy, will you now issue the oath of office? Thank you so much.
I state your name,
I, Mark Azapardi,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
I will support the Constitution of the United States
I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey,
and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey,
and I will faithfully discharge
and I will faithfully discharge
the duties of police captain
the duties of police captain
of the Milburn Township Police Department
of the Milburn Township Police Department
according to the best of my ability,
according to the best of my ability,
so help me God.
so help me God.
Congratulations. Oh, my pleasure. Congratulations.
Good job. I'm sure you would all love to stay for our meeting. However, we'll take a 5-minute break.
Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, we're back. Reports. Ms. Prupus, why don't I start with you on reports? Any reports for us tonight?
No reports.
No reports. Okay, Mr. Cohen, do you have any reports this evening,
I
sir?
do two things. First of all, we had the annual meeting for the Corner Archer Arboretum. At that meeting, Ian Mount, who has been the chair of the Board of Trustees for many years, announced that he would no longer be continuing. And so we certainly thank him for his many years of service to the Arboretum. And the Board of Trustees elected Sarah Webb as the new chair of the Board of Trustees. That's one thing. Secondly, as I'm sure many of you know, we had a planning board meeting last week, and on the agenda was the site plan for the Annie Says development. The planning board rejected it, denied it on the grounds that the affordable units were not integrated throughout the building.
Okay.
So were there next steps? Or on
We,
the planning
we,
board or?
I guess we have to wait for an
We have to-
attorney.
Yeah,
We have to wait for the attorney.
That's a separate matter of a planning board that is not something that is presently before you.
No, I know, I just didn't know if there was next steps to report on to it being rejected.
Ms. Romano?
Yes, just a couple from Explore. Her MD ribbon cutting, Thursday, August 3rd from 6 to 8 at 241 Milburn Avenue, followed by open house and grand opening. Anyone interested can RSVP to Amanda at marketing@exploreMilburnShortHills.org. A new business mixer and Explore's anniversary party is Thursday, August 31st. 4 o'clock is the new business mixer, 5:30 is the party at Jack's Lobster Shack. You can join Explore and the Milburn Short Hills Chamber of Commerce. New businesses that have opened since 2020 are welcome to attend the meet and greet and networking. The event will be then open to all businesses to celebrate Explore's 3-year anniversary. 5 new businesses came into town. NB Mooney Baby Boutique at 348 Milburn Avenue. Lisa Raymond Goldfarb Photography at 350 Milburn Avenue. Sweet Tooth Pediatric Dentistry at 313 Milburn Avenue. And Preferred Care at Home of Northeast New Jersey at 101 Main Street.
Thank you so much. Just wanted to recognize Neil Healy, who retired this week. I guess we had his retirement party for, who was part of our recreation department for 30 years. He's such an integral part of our community. He will be sorely missed. And that's it for me. So we will go to public comment. Did you have a, I'm sorry. Did you want to say something? Mr. McDonald?
Yeah, just a few quick updates. I had mentioned at a previous meeting that the Mayor's Rahway River Coalition had met, had a charrette with the Army Corps of Engineers as well as the New Jersey Department of Protection. This week we met with the Army Corps to go over what their potential solutions are and that they're going to present up their vertical hierarchy to move forward with. The four solutions that they're coming up with, and these are very general in nature right now, and we'll find out more about whether those solutions will be taken up by the Corps. But one is no action, which is always part of every list of solutions. Another is detention, which could potentially take place in Campbell's Mill Pond or Diamond Mill Pond, and or somewhere in the South Mountain Reservation. The third option is channelization, quite extensive channelization throughout the Rahway River Basin. And the fourth option is a large scale, what they call non-structural, which is the acquisition of homes or the elevation of homes that are in flood prone areas. So that work continues. And as I had stated previously, once the Army Corps decides to move forward with a solution, that they would have a public charrette that would be open to more stakeholders within the Rahway River Basin. So that continues. Just wanted to provide a quick update on the township's road repaving that's going on over the summer, and some other things that will impact the township in terms of closures as a result of this work. We are finishing up on Exeter and Campbell. Campbell, we are waiting for PSE&G to vacate. They had, when we were doing some sewer repairs on Campbell, Public Works noticed the odor of gas, and apparently there was a leak there. We were able to call PSE&G to come in and make those repairs on an emergency basis. So once they vacate the street, then we can start finishing up the improvements to Campbell, and then Exeter and Campbell will be milled and paved together. Highland is slated for our 2023 road reconstruction projects. We are looking to start that as early as next week. July 24th. It's going to involve some curb work, gutter work, some drainage, and then a full mill and pave of Highland from Hartshorn to Hobart. And there will be some overlap. The New Jersey American Water has a project that is going to take place under the Short Hills Avenue Bridge. As you may have noticed, the Short Hills Avenue was paved, a section was left unpaved, and that was paved after the train trestle, taking some time to get some permits that needed to be gotten for underneath that bridge. They're going to be doing some repairs there that will result in a closure of Short Hills Avenue while they make those repairs. It is anticipated that it will be open after each day as they complete work, but cars will be detoured down Chatham Road or down Crescent. And so just wanted the residents to be aware of that. So there will be a lot of work going on in that area, but we wanted to make sure that we address this over the summer before school starts. So we do anticipate both that work under the Short Hills Avenue train trestle as well as Highland Avenue to be completed before Labor Day.
I have a quick question for you. Very often we'll get emails from residents who are concerned about their streets getting repaved as well. There's a system that we follow. I just want that to get out to the town. That do we rank the roads? How do we determine which road gets paved first?
Yes. So we actually about 3 or 4 years ago, we did a street scan by IMS that scanned the condition of every road in the township and assigned a a pavement condition index to those roads. So they were ranked either poor, marginal, good, very good. And so we have been tackling roads that are in poor or marginal condition based on the average pavement condition index of those roadways. And so there have been some examples like, for instance, that they need additional work when it comes to drainage and stuff like that, that we've tackled as well. But these are full road reconstruction projects. So we are not tackling a bunch of roads all at once because some of the conditions of these roads, whether it's drainage or curbing, are quite extensive. So your dollar doesn't stretch as far when you're doing all that other work associated with the roadway. But yes, there is a system that we use to rank those roads and make sure that we're tackling those that are in the worst condition first.
And we've switched away from just, what did we used to do? We used to
Micro paving. Yeah, which was basically a nice fresh paint job on the roadway. It lasted about 2 to 3 years. By doing full road reconstruction, mill and pave, we're getting about 7 to 10 years out of most roadways. For those roads that are less traveled, you'll get far more than that.
Okay, thank you. I just put that out there.
And I just one final update I wanted to make, and I had updated the township committee that we need to shift the priority that we have for the parking utility. There are some maintenance items within the parking deck that we need to address before the freeze thaw cycle. A lot of caulking and a lot of different things that need to be given attention. And so we are going to shift away from the lot 14 improvements for the time being. We don't anticipate being able to get to that in August. So, which was a time that we wanted to make sure we were able to get in there and not impact the businesses as much. So we still have plans on doing that, but we are going to wait for 2024 to make those lot 14 improvements so that we can address the parking deck, which is taking a higher priority right now.
But Alex, you and I talked about perhaps doing some improvements with respect to lighting.
That's correct.
That
Yeah,
did not have to wait for the pavement.
correct. Yes.
So we're going to have,
So there's there's safety concerns in that particular lot. We currently have temporary, speed humps in that lot. And there's a concern over lighting. So we are going to look to address that. But as far as the full sort of reconstruction, the repaving, we're going to hold off on that until 2024.
thank you. That's it?
Yeah.
Mr. Mariziti, any reports for us this evening, sir?
I do not have any reports, but I'll do my best to answer any questions as they come up.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay. Public comment. When invited to speak, please come to the lectern, clearly state your name and whether you are a Milburn resident and/or property or business owner, and speak loudly so that your comments may be understood by all and properly recorded. Please do not provide your full address, seeing our meetings are recorded and are readily available to the public. For the convenience of our community, there is a remote option available. If you called in and would like to comment, please press *6 now. If you are attending by computer or electronic device, please click the raise hand button. All members of the public wishing to speak will be put into the queue to address the committee. To help facilitate an orderly meeting and to permit all to be heard, speakers are asked to limit their comments to 1 3-minute session. You will be prompted when there's 30 seconds remaining. Each individual will be given 1 opportunity to make their public comment. Please be patient, and we will address each member of the public that wishes to speak. This is a business meeting, and please do not address professionals or staff directly, and please do direct all your comments to me. A reminder that we are all neighbors and personal attacks are strongly discouraged. I will now open the public comment period. Good evening.
My name is Susan Ballas.
Good evening.
I live in Milburn.
Yes.
We have had emails.
Yes, we have.
And I have a lot of concerns.
Yes, ma'am.
Main Street being closed to the southern end of Milburn Avenue up into Essex is a nightmare. My husband had a heart attack, 2 of them. Well, really 3 of them. One at home on June 30th. To get through this town by ambulance was wonderful.
Thank you.
Police were wonderful.
Thank you.
congestion in this town is terrible. If he had EMS wanted to take him to Overlook because, quote, town is blocked off. Main Street should not be blocked off to get to a major hospital. Because if anybody else, if it was your loved one, you would want them there as quick as possible. During a heart attack and during a stroke, time is of the essence.
Yes, ma'am.
To have people dining, enjoying hamburgers and drinks, whatever, is not as important as someone's life. There is no reason, and I have emails, I have people on Facebook, I have friends here that'll tell you the same thing. Open up Main Street. If it was your loved one, you would be beside yourself. Okay? By the time he got to the hospital, being diverted on June 30th, around 10:30, 11-ish, this town was chaos.
I'm sorry, AM or PM?
And
Okay. thank you.
this town was chaos. It was a holiday weekend. Okay? I ran through red lights, around people, through stop signs, so that I could get there to the hospital as well. I did not follow EMS. My daughter-in-laws did not follow EMS, and they arrived later. Okay? He got to the hospital, within 9 to 10 minutes, he had another heart attack. Had he arrived at that hospital through the direct route of Main Street, that second heart attack may have been prevented. We don't know. We can't say, I'm not a doctor. It may have been prevented. Oh, my third mom almost stopped.
You have time, go ahead.
But it needs to be opened. It's time to open up the street. Open up going north. Let us get to the hospital. Let us get to the hospital. Why should we have to be diverted around this town? There is no reason for it. You want to keep Main Street open for dining, which is ridiculous anyway. Open up the southbound, like you have it. You have 2 lanes going south and 1 going north. This man is very sick. He almost died because he could not get to a hospital in time. There is no reason Main Street should be closed. None. Let us get to the close other just parking lots. Open a parking lot to that. Open up Main. That's all I'm telling you. This is not right. If it was your loved one, you would want to get to a hospital as soon as possible.
Thank you, Ms. Fellows. Thank you for coming.
I'm the heart attack victim, you know?
Say your name.
Armando Vallis, I'm the heart attack victim. They say every minute that prolongs you from getting help does damage to your heart. You know, so me detouring, I haven't seen my cardiologist yet.
Oh.
But I'm curious to see if it's done any damage to my heart. Are you happy? You look very happy. You're smiling.
I'm happy to see you.
Yeah, okay. I'm happy to be here, let me tell you. You know,
Thank God.
I went and got also a cancer patient.
Mr. Ballas, do you mind, just for the
I'm a
record?
cancer patient. I
Okay.
went to see my cardiologist today, and on my way home from a treatment, my wife dropped me off on Essex Street, coming down the hill, dropped me off on Essex Street. I said, hon, drop me off. I want to videotape going from Essex Street to Main Street and see what the big deal is closing off a main road to the hospital. You know what I saw? 2 people eating in front of Standard. 2 people sitting on the sidewalk eating in front of Standard. What if I have another heart attack? I might have one right now. What if I have another heart attack? I got to go around Standard? I got to go around to get to the hospital? What's wrong with you people? Seriously.
Not personal.
It's okay.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Ballas. Thank you, Mr. Ballas. Good Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Mayor. Daniel Cannon, a Milburn resident. I have two announcements I'm very proud to be a part of. Number one is that the Sons of the American Legion actually is back. Not yet, Ryan. The Sons of the American Legion is back in town. It was actually founded in 1967 in the middle of the Vietnam War. And we've had a lot of individuals in this town actually run it. I think one gentleman back there is past commander, right? And, over the years, it kind of fell by the wayside. So we're kind of very happy to bring it back because of Commander Brown actually reaching out to Ryan and I saying he'd like to bring some youth into and younger blood into the American Legion program. He runs a great program, Commander Brown, but he needs some help. So this is kind of a call out to the community. If you're interested in being a member of the Sons of the American Legion, we are back up and running. We're fully chartered. These are direct descendants of veterans, or whether you're a grandfather, your grandfather, or your father served. The program is very important because it actually serves the community in a few ways. One, it promotes patriotism and Americanism. Very important. And I think we're losing that a little bit in today's society. Second, it supports the veterans. Third, it actually helps the youth. As you know, me in my other uniform has been Scoutmaster, and I'd like to bring some of that youth program back to the community and do that through this veteran organization. And lastly, it promotes community service. And that light, I'd like to introduce the other project I'm very happy to be a part of. This is not an undertaking by myself. It was Commander Brown, myself, my daughter Katie, Karen Bigos, and yours truly, it's not on that one, Gary Waltz, who is the Grand Marshal of this year's Memorial Day Parade. Many towns around here actually have a banner for residents that have formerly served. Maybe they've passed, maybe they're still alive, or maybe they're actively serving. We're actually, as a fundraiser for the American Legion, each banner is $200. It will be put up on poles down by the Milburn High School, and it'll be, up on the poles somewhere between Memorial Day and Veterans Day. So this year we're trying our goal to get a few banners up and up on the poles before Veterans Day, and we're hoping the community will support that. If you know a veteran, your father, your grandfather, aunt, uncle that lived in the town, your son may be an active, daughter may be in active duty right now, please support the American Legion and please honor them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cannon.
Hi, Ben Stoller, Milburn resident, also running for town council under a Republican ticket in this upcoming election. Couple of things I want to discuss. First, Commander Brown, job you guys are doing fantastic. We just heard about Annie Says was denied, that project. And I have a couple of questions on why it was denied. And if that's going to be consistent throughout the town. And I think this question is going to be for Mr. Mariziti. Mr. Buzek, and this specifically goes to the 75 unit project at the dump that's going to be remediated to build. But we talk about that being a segregated unit of 75 families, low income families, segregated between a substation and a train tracks, and the busiest road I've ever seen in Short Hills Road. And this, Annie Says, was denied because there were 5 consecutive low-income houses right next to, contiguous to each other. So I want to make sure that we're understanding how this works. For that's okay there, but it's not okay on the dump, where we're going to put the 75 families, which we want to welcome into our community. But what was unexplainable, where fact is truly stranger than fiction in our town, is that I've talked to town council members, they all said that we had a gun to our head from fair share housing. Now, these are comments directly from our attorney, Mr. Buzek. He explained, and I'm going to quote him because I don't want to get this wrong. Fair share is not a regulatory agency. It is not the government, and it's not the arm of judiciary. Fair Share is an advocacy organization whose mission is to advance the cause of housing for low and moderate income households. when I hear that, and I try to put that into context of why we're doing the 75 unit, 3-bedroom housing here on the dump, it doesn't really correlate that you guys all told the community directly that we had to do it. Fair share housing had a quote unquote, not my quote from the TC, a gun to our head. So either you did it under duress or there's more other issues involved. I want to understand what the obligation of the town is fair share housing, do they have the right to tell us to put the 75 unit, or is that being done for other reasons? Simple, thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Stoller.
Good evening. My name is Jeffrey Feld. I'm a resident of Short Hills. I too am a survivor of heart attacks. It'll be 24 years come August. Before, I think we need to have, first, I think we need to have a resolution at the next meeting, thanking Neil Healy for all this service that he did. So my family benefited from that. Also, we heard about the parking decks, that we had to shift monies, but we need to change, I believe, our capital budget to reflect those new changes, because you said they cost overruns, and I don't think we've done that. As to the bill list, because I am a contrarian, got broken promises. There's on the bill list, there's a payment to the SID from taxpayers' dollars. 2 people that were up here ran for office saying that no taxpayers' money would be used to fund the SID. There's a question about bait and switch, about the downtown pedestrian mall. We heard about the problems. When you look at your minutes from June 6th, I asked specifically questions as to what was the enabling statute. It wasn't under the pedestrian mall, it was under a different statute. The minutes don't reflect that discussion, but the video does. There's a serious problem. Because also I've been making open requests to see where the state signed off on it, because according to the ordinance on its face, you need to sign off from the state. That piece of paper has never been presented to me. There's still an issue when you look at the bill list about the high center, whether the JIF is defending us. I don't believe so, because the payments seem to be coming from taxpayer dollars when you look at the payments to the Marzini phone. When you look at this, and based on the statements that were just made and based on what on the planning board, I think we're entitled to an accounting of all the monies we spent in the fair share housing litigation, breaking it out from pre-July 30th, 2021 and after that date. I've been asking that for, I don't know, 2 years. As to resolutions 23, 189, 191, 192, 193. My quick looking at it, I did not see an availability of funds certification that's mandatory. This is not the first time I've asked for this. This is something that has to be done. And the question is, we're safe, keep on making the same mistake, someone should be paid and held accountable for that. In October 2021, our new CFO promised that we would get like a quarterly or 6-month analysis of the revenues that came in and expenditures compared to the budget. We just finished our first 6 months. I ask at the next meeting that we have an analysis to know how much money we've expended, especially that there was a crime meeting in the poet section, and the mayor told us that we had about 1,000 hours overtime for police. And I want to know how we're paying for that, if that was allocated in the budget, or where's that money coming from? So you can't shift money about that. I have a series of open questions that have not been answered. I'd like answers to them. And as my custom, the public should know, prior to this meeting, I asked to meet with the city council and to go over these issues. I wouldn't have to raise them here, waste other people's time, but you never respond to me. You never give me the opportunity. It forces me to come here.
Thank you, Mr. Feld.
Charles Bambara, Township President. I have a question regarding, I saw it was on the docket possibly for the earlier meeting, the relocation of the DPW site. And I assume that also includes the municipal dump. And I'd like to know if the township has filed the required environmental impact statement with the State Department of Environmental Protection and the federal EPA regarding potential runoff and pollutants from a municipal dump site to a public drinking water supply that's within 200 yards. I'm an engineer and I understand some of these things, but there's plumes of pollution that travel underground with water, and a proper study has to be done as to any potential effect on that water supply. If it hasn't been done, I believe it's required by law. And so my question is, has that been done? And if it's not, I believe it needs to be done. You know, we're playing with fire here. I'm sure we've all heard of Love Canal, and corporations went bankrupt from that. If there's an incident with pollution that comes back to this township will be bankrupt instantaneously. You know, we just do not have the funding to sustain that like a large corporation would. So that was my question.
Thank you,
If you've
Mr.
done it, I'd like to
Well,
know.
Thank you, sir. Hello, Leah Cruz, resident of Short Hills. I wasn't planning to get up and speak tonight, but after hearing Susan Ballas, I don't know if I have your name correctly, after hearing that story, it's so heartbreaking. And I wholeheartedly concur that Main Street should be opened up. It's beautiful. It's nice to see people listening to music, kids playing in the street. I love seeing that, but knowing people's lives are in danger, I mean, that's really just disheartening. I'm sure the township would have immunity if somebody ever decided to sue over somebody's life. Like I said, I think there's immunity. So I don't think that a lawsuit would go forward, but knowing that, I don't know how in clear conscience you can keep Main Street closed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cruz.
Hello, my name is Christine Best. I'm a Milburn Township resident. And I'm just going to read a document they'll be sending to the township. So this is actually addressed to Alex, one of your assistants, and Jessica, I'm sorry, and you, Alex. So per Jessica, I was told that I was required to ask in writing for my 5G hoplite Mr. Lupo over request. This is in regard to 5G safety in the township, which the township is all hiding from me, by the way. Which I was unjustly denied to be reevaluated in terms of the latest attorney-compliant privilege claim. I have waited for Milburn Township on this request since 2/13/23. And instead of just firmly turning me down, the Milburn Township BA, TC, and council continue to create absurd excuses to delay public information of a right to see regarding 5G antenna strategy. Let me tell you, the Township of Belmar actually is working with their township residents with the 20 poles that Verizon's trying to put it in. If you don't think that's not coming here, you're very sorely mistaken for anybody who doesn't think that. It is the right of all Americans to live in peace without being physically challenged by health hazards, which are intentionally hidden from them. I've repeatedly asked for over a year to see all locations of the cell and small cell towers in existence and in development to be aware of impending health hazards that could affect myself as well as other residents. Withholding this information is the equivalent of not telling someone that there's lead in the water when you have the test information that confirms it. I originally filed the request in 2/13, received part of my request, which was a draft contract, the final contract between Milburn Township and Peter Lupo Hoplite. At that time, I was told that there was no attorney-client privilege. This excuse was invented later when I reiterated that I wanted access to all documents. I was very gracious to re-clarify to Jessica in a different way the details of the request is incomplete as of 4/3. I basically stated the same thing I put in writing verbally, but for some reason it was not acceptable enough for the documents that I requested. Then I get further delays. I must wait additional weeks for the similar information, and I get another case reference to Schuyler versus New Jersey Department of Education applying the exact plan of this request. And it was completely not applicable. Finally, on 4/28/23, I received a few emails from Milburn Townships showing communication between Mr. Lupo and some members of the township as well as Verizon. Most of the emails were redacted due to attorney-client privilege. This is a false construct, as was admitted by Mr. McDonald on multiple occasions on video. Jessica, you made it clear to me this was not your decision. I must assume that Alex, the township council, Mr. Mariziti, and Ms. Miggins was advised of this choice to use attorney-client privilege as an excuse not to provide me with the over requested information. Since they were made aware of this in TC meetings and knew it was in conflict with the contract document that showed no reference to Mr. Lupo as an acting attorney for the township. In his documents, he clearly discusses acting only as a consultant for 5G safety and rollout advisement for the township. And his contract is stamped with cellular technology company Hoplite Consulting versus his real estate law practice. I brought this up over a month ago in a township meeting. Ms. Prupus point blank asked if you, Alex, and Mr. Lupo was acting as hired or counsel, and you stated no. After that meeting, I have a paragraph and a half left. After that meeting, I was expected to have my Oprah request processed properly, yet no one responded even after you commented that you would resolve or investigate it. At the most recent township meeting, Tara again asked to resolve this issue. You stated you would find the information requested. And now multiple weeks later, I've not received it. Based on this evasive, passive aggressive show that you've provided upon the approval of the township committee, except for Ms. Prupus, I'm expecting further evasion of this required deliverable. At this time, I hereby request one more time that you fulfill the request that I have been stating that you will take care of formally by the end of this week in full, in writing, electronically, in an organized and readable fashion. I must assume that the $20K plus consulting fee that he has received, I will receive a lot more emails showing that he's actually done work. And I would like to point out one last few sentences, and I'm done, Maggie, and I appreciate the extra time this time. I would also like to point out there are no clear set of deliverables with the deadline set in your contract with Mr. Lupo. Having a contract without an SOW, which is a statement of work with deliverable descriptions, dates, and capped financial amounts, is an irresponsible business arrangement. In addition, from one of the emails.
Ms. Best, we're done.
that-
We're finished. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, I'll
Thank you
just
very
follow
much.
up with the next one, Maggie.
Thank you.
so much.
Thank you. Okay, good. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Sarah Sherman, resident. My lane is flooding, and that's what I want to talk about. The region is experiencing a new level of heavy rainfall and flash flooding. We all know about recent events in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, Vermont, and we haven't even had a named storm yet in the Northeast. We used to talk about 100-year storms and our fear. Now we're talking about 500 and millennial events. 7 inches of rain in 45 minutes in Pennsylvania. And this morning, half an hour of rain in New Brunswick that resulted in rescues of small children and submerged cars. So we can't talk about flooding anymore in terms of areas that are usually affected. I think we have to now understand that this affects all of us. Residents should sign up for township alerts. Please watch the recording of our annual storm preparedness meeting with the OEM team and get flood insurance. Educate yourselves. Flash flooding is not something that happens to other people. We are all at risk. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sherman. Jesse, anyone online?
Hi, good evening. Thank you for hanging on to me. It's Perry Urso, 514 Milburn Avenue in Short Hills.
Good evening, Ms. Urso.
Thank you. So I would like to say, I believe that forgive me if I'm pronouncing it incorrectly, the Ballas family,
Yep.
they should be told the statute in which this body approved the Main Street closure on behalf of the Special Improvement District known as the SID. Also, without any studies that anyone requested on this body, and an actual determination or an approval by the state, just as attorney resident Mr. Feld just mentioned earlier. I'd like to ask also, when will this body address lot 14? And forgive me if it was mentioned earlier in the meeting, I was not available, so I do apologize. When will this body inform the 12 property owners who will be affected by the changes that their properties are on the perimeter of lot 14? Ms. Prupus, to date, I would like you to know, to my knowledge, we have not been contacted, and it looks like the township is within 2 weeks away from a shovel in the ground. We were told that this change is going to happen in August of 2023. Still to date, we haven't heard anything. No one's gotten back to us. And lastly, Ms. Miggins, can you please ask and direct Mr. Maritziti under what laws this TC nor department heads or our business administrator do not have to answer the public questions. This has been going on long enough. Enough is enough. Kindly address why or under what laws and what statutes that you do not have any right to answer your public constituents. Thank you and have a wonderful evening. And good
Thank
luck
you.
to the Blias family.
Thank you, Ms. Urso.
Who is that woman? I hope she don't have to get to the hospital.
Food sucks over there too.
Come on.
I will now close the public comment period. At this time, our professionals and committee members may directly answer any questions made by the public. Please only direct answer questions that you may wish to comment on and do not request that of other members or professionals. We're not going to dialogue, but if anybody does have questions, they can contact the Township Committee anytime outside of our business meetings. We all have email. If you have questions, you want to speak with us, it'd be our pleasure to be able to speak with you. Mr. McDonald, I'm going to start with you. Are there any comments you wish to address with the comments that were made this evening, please?
Yeah, I would just like to address Ms. Urso's comments about lot 14. I understand that she may have missed the beginning of the meeting, and just reiterate that the township has shifted priority from lot 14. And we are going to focus on the deck to do necessary improvements and maintenance to that before the next freeze thaw cycle. And so lot 14 will be shelved for the time being with some potential minor improvements over there. And we will look at August 2024 to make those improvements. The individual who asked about the permits for the DPW site, I think that part of that is certainly has to be part of any relocation. In particular, if that relocation is to JFK, where the former composting site for our leaves, there are necessary permits that we are aware of and that we will be applying for. But at this point in time, the focus has been on what needs to be done with the current development of the 75 units. But that is not to say that we've lost sight of the relocation of a portion of that. I think it's also important to keep in mind that convenience center, or dump as people have called it, is where people drop off, junk, where they will drop off grass clippings or other things, where we have our salt dome, things like that. It is not particularly someplace where we don't accept hazardous materials. We do not accept things that I think were alluded to a little bit in that, but certainly understand the requirements that are associated with that. To answer Mr. Feld's question regarding the High Center, we have been provided determination by the insurance carrier that they will be covering it. That just recently happened, so you'll see that. As far as, I'm sorry. Yes, we did receive the approval of DOT as it comes to and the enabling statute that they as it comes to the Main Street closure. So I assume if that hasn't been provided in one of your open requests, it will be provided. The last thing is Miss Best. So I just want to be clear that Mr. Lupo is also working as he helps the engineering department as well as the zoning department review when we do receive small cell location applications. As I've stated previously in these meetings, that the township does not have the ability to deny those applications. However, we do have the ability to work with the carrier and where they are located and what they may look like and things like that. So he has acted in that capacity. As far as her Oprah requests, I have not had any instruction of any employee when it comes to Oprah. I usually what happens when Oprah comes in is if it has to do with me, people will ask me whether I have documents. That is the extent of my involvement in Oprah. Oprah is a regulated matter that is done through the clerk's office as the custodian of records. And so I will also let Christine, and I hope you don't mind that I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit here, but to explain a little bit more about the situation as it comes to Ms. Best's request, and I think it has to do something with, I think that can be accomplished very simply in putting that request in writing so that we know exactly what Ms. Best is looking for. Go ahead, Kristen.
My assistant, Ms. Cruz, has been handling it. We receive about 500 Oprah requests a year, so I'm sure you can understand it's a big task. And all requests that you have been submitting have been responded to. So I understand there's been some confusion as to some things you don't feel should be redacted. And my understanding is that Ms. Cruz asked you to resubmit if you want them to be looked at again. So that was the conversation you and Ms. Cruz had. So you're certainly welcome to resubmit.
This is not a dialogue, Ms. Best.
And she has not received it in writing. So
Ms. Best, this is not a dialogue, Ms. Best.
So certainly if you want to resubmit, we'd be happy to do it. Again, it's only for specific records. I understand you have a lot of questions and you're welcome to submit them to departments that can answer them. But for records requests, please, like, you can call me directly. But you have to put it in writing just because it has to be specific.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gaddy. Thank you. Mr. Marizzi.
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
Yes, thank you.
Excuse me, I'm taking my grandchildren out, because you know they almost lost their grandfather. Let's get out of here. Let's go. Because you people, I hope you never need an ambulance in an emergency, really. I hope it's not you that's gonna almost die.
Thank you, Mayor. I
Is it
do
not
have
a priority though?
It's not a priority.
Is anybody, are you guys thinking about it? What are
Excuse
we
me,
gonna do about it?
so let me explain something to you.
Please do.
Okay, so we said it in the,
So
big.
far.
we said it, excuse me, that language doesn't get tolerated in this business meeting.
Of two
It's
people
unacceptable.
sitting. I got a video, of two people
I just
sitting
wanna
there.
know what's.
Excuse me,
I'll show you the
sir.
video.
Sir, I'll explain this to you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, just because you've never been here, excuse me, may I speak?
Sure.
Thank you.
Fire engines can't even get through.
I just wanna know.
What we do,
I don't wanna
excuse
know about the
me,
People.
I cannot,
Stop them,
sir,
no, we're not.
excuse
Hey,
me,
people that think
excuse
it
me,
should be open.
excuse me.
Stand up, stand up.
Excuse
People that think it should be open.
Stand
up.
I just wanna
People
know
that think
what's gonna be
You
done.
should close the street to the hospital, main thing to the hospital. Please stand up.
Because you might be the next victim,
you
or
know
you,
what?
that needs that ambulance.
Thank everybody.
Sorry, you're not standing up.
Because you might need an ambulance, and I hope they don't get to your family in time. Because it's all bull. Let's go.
And these are county roads. I'm just throwing down.
Oh, well, you don't need a sandwich, that's more important.
I'm just saying, all those roads are county roads. It's not.
Gentlemen.
It's multiple.
Somebody almost died because.
I gotta walk that road.
Anyway, I'll tell you that they.
They better hope that something doesn't happen.
We'll take a 5-minute break, please.
All right.
We're back. So, Mr. Mariziti,
Yes.
we were just gonna get to you about anything you wanted to respond to in terms of public comment.
Yes, thank you.
Thank
A couple of quick things. I'll start with Mr. Stoller's comment about the 75%, 75 unit, 100% affordable housing project. And as you know, I was not involved in any of the transactions that led to that settlement. But I see Mr. Feld doesn't agree with that, but I was not. My partner was, Kit Falcon. And I have learned a lot about it after the fact. And it's true that Fair Share Housing Center is not a state agency. It doesn't have the regulatory power to force anybody to do anything. But it was a plaintiff in a lawsuit, and that gave it a different status.
Wasn't a plaintiff.
Excuse me, Mr. Feld, this is not dialogue, sir. This is a business meeting, please.
I'm an
Sir,
attorney.
excuse me,
When I
sir,
state the
Mr.
facts, I
Mr.
have the
Feld,
right to talk.
Mr. Feld, no, you don't.
You are correct, Mr. Feld. They were not a plaintiff. They were a party to the action. And the action was in order to achieve immunity from a builder's remedy by Milburn. Because Milburn, as well known, had not for a very, very, very long time addressed its affordable housing obligation. So there was litigation about that. And as I understand it, we were on the eve of a trial date. The judge was pushing for the trial to be scheduled within a few days. And in order to avoid a trial that would have led to a probable very bad outcome for Milburn because of its inability over the years to have addressed the issue, a settlement was achieved. And the settlement part of the settlement was dealing with fair share housing. So in that sense, the township did not have leverage at that late date in the proceedings in order to protect itself against other remedies. And so the settlement avoided much worse outcomes for the township, which should be. Pardon me? There's not a dialogue. The other outcome would have been to have lost its immunity from builder's remedy lawsuits, which would have resulted in the possibility that builders assembling sites in the township would have been able to achieve a builder's remedy, which is what is a builder's remedy? It's an opportunity to set aside the normal zoning on a site and achieve a greater zoning, greater density on the condition that 80% of the units would be market rate and 20% would be affordable. That would create a lot more activity in terms of impact on parking and traffic and on schools than the outcome that was achieved. And so the issue about fair share housing, forcing the township is a form of a manner of speaking. They were a party before the court and had great sway in that outcome. That's my understanding. I don't have any knowledge about Annie Says. I've not been involved in that transaction in any way at all, so I won't comment on the Annie Says project.
Wasn't part of the settlement?
I'm sorry, I'm not allowed to get engaged in dialogue. So I'm going to turn next to the issue about the very important concern about contamination of drinking water supplies and the question of EIS. It's of great interest to me because over the years I have succeeded as an attorney in bringing polluters to account for contamination of public water supply systems and forcing them to clean them up. So when you're citing something, it's important to have an awareness of that potential impact. I am not aware of any state environmental impact statement requirement, but maybe there is one. I do know about federal EISs or impact statements, environmental impact statements, because I've litigated those issues. And a federal environmental impact statement is not required unless it's a major federal action rather than a local municipality action, a federal action significantly affecting the human environment. And that's when a federal EIS is required. With respect to the question about answering questions that Ms. Urzo asked, well, I'm in the process of answering questions, so it isn't entirely accurate that there is not responses to questions that are raised. Mr. McDonald's answered some questions as well. We've done that over time. However, from a legal point of view, it is very clear that the only obligation of a governing body or a public body is to give hearing to the public, to listen to the public. There's no obligation to engage in a dialogue. There's no legal obligation to answer questions. This township committee has gone beyond the minimum and has provided this opportunity that I am now using to respond. And I have no further.
Thank you so much. Ms. Lucas?
Yes. So. You're welcome. Oh my God. I'm just kind of like still processing the family that came in here and everything that just happened tonight. And thank God that that man didn't die on the way to the hospital. But I see that as a warning and a potential that that could happen. And when we first had the closure, it was during lockdown. It was summer of 2020, and there were, and we did it because people weren't going inside, and it addressed a very specific need. And it was great. But we're living in a very different world now, 2023 than 2020. And I mean, I have a store in downtown Millburn, and I think I benefit from the closure as a business. Right. I mean, I'm just acknowledging that as a business, I benefit, but that's not worth the risk of somebody not making it to the hospital. So I think that I mean, I'm definitely ready to say, like, the closure does not need to be there. And I would not want something happening where there was a death or an injury or anybody being hurt because of the closure. So I don't know how anybody else feels. And to the family that left before they got to see how, you know, I'm sorry that they left, and I can understand why they were so angry and didn't understand the entire process that we were hopefully all going to address that incident and that topic when it was our turn to speak to it. But I think we need to reevaluate the closure, and that means that I don't think it's necessary anymore. And I don't think it's necessary, and because of this being something that happened and to address, I think we should open it up. Because I, for one, am not going to be held accountable or have a vote to something that would prevent somebody from getting to the hospital even by like a few minutes, that they have to navigate more congested roads because Main Street is closed. So I just wanted to address that, and I mean, it's just really upsetting that occurred. Well, I want to talk about it, so I don't know if that's like a motion. So I want to put out, I don't know if, or I wait just to see how everybody else feels about it.
Yeah, I think that.
And does it get opened up on a motion? Is that how a resolution, is that how it gets opened? Do we have to take a formal action to open up the closure? Alex? Or we do?
But I think we should let everyone speak and see what else. Do you have anything else you wanted to respond to with other comments from anyone else who had public comments?
No, I just also think that
I think it should have been communicated to that family and to everybody at that time that we were going to address it. And maybe just to communicate the process of public comment, and a lot of times you actually start with me. So I'm not sure why tonight, I mean, pretty much every other night, you start with public comment responding, like you start with me to do it. I'm not sure why that didn't happen, I think. So for one thing, I would just, for like some consistency in the way who you call on what, because every other time that I'm sitting in this chair, it's Ms. Purvis, usually I'm the one that opens it. So some consistency there, just if you see a lot of people in the room that have never been here before, to like explain to them the process so they know that everyone's gonna get a turn to speak to it.
And you're welcome.
I just want to address Ms. Sherman's call to flood awareness and people buying flood insurance, because that is true, and people are always, I just want to commend you for getting up there and still speaking about it, because you're right, we haven't had a storm and yet here. That's not to say that's coming, so just like once again, people like be aware that our township floods and to look into buying flood insurance for your homes. No.
Yeah, I would like to address as best as I can that there's a difference in the affordable housing developments. There's two kinds of affordable housing developments. And that's because the state has determined that there's a really severe need for affordable housing. So there are two pathways. One of them is the 100% affordable units like at my Main Street. And that the state is so concerned about that they've offered all sorts of funding and grants and whatnot to developments that do that. The other mechanism, which is the majority of the developments here, the rest of them, the other pathway is to let private developers do it, where it's 80-20, 20% affordable, 80% market rate. And that ratio is determined to be sufficient so that the developers will build and still make a profit. However, when you're taking that pathway and you are making a profit, it doesn't mean you can do that on the backs of the people living in affordable housing. So when we looked at the Annie Says development, we felt that the units were, all of the undesirable units were the ones that were deemed to be designated as affordable, and we didn't feel that that was the correct way to go. So a majority of the planning board denied the application. At this point, as far as next steps, that's really up to the developer. They could come back with a new site plan that does a different job of placing the units. They could take legal action. They could do nothing. It's really up to them. But hopefully that will explain the difference between the two.
Anything else?
That's it.
Thank you. Ms. Romano?
I'm also grateful that Mr. Valles is okay. I am not ready to talk about it until we hear from our first responders. I think that when we first started with the closure, we did get feedback from police, fire, and EMS. So I would like to have some discussion on how they feel, if they feel that there's a delayed response because of it, before I offer any opinion.
Okay, thank you. I think everybody covered everything, but let me just double check. Mr. McDonald, is there a way for us to find out where exactly the 5G poles are going and or were like? I remember when Verizon came to us that one time and wanted to put them, there was one across from Hartshorn and one on Old Short Hills Road. And I remember saying, hey, did they alert the families that live in those homes?
Yeah, it was a requirement that the committee asked them to the people that were close proximity.
Okay, so they're still doing that?
Yeah, to my knowledge, we have not had additional applications because those applications, again, come before the committee as a courtesy to let you know that they're going in.
Mhm.
Again, not necessarily approval, but they are put before the committee. But yes, we can get the locations that are currently.
Okay, that's great. And then I will agree with you. Ms. Romano, that's terrible. I'm so happy to see Mr. Vallis here this evening. I'm sorry he suffers from cancer as well. That's a terrible thing to have two things like that happen to him. And I would, if we can we get some idea of what exactly happened? Why, what was the delay? Can we speak to the rescue squad? Can we speak to the police? Can we speak to the paramedics that were there to help him? Can we find out exactly what happened? Did somebody saying something like the town is blocked off? I mean, do they offer to take him to Overlook? Do they offer to take everyone to, like, can we find all this information out? Thank goodness the gentleman is fine, thank goodness. But can we try and find some more information to find out exactly what happened, and was there a delay? And then
I have a question about that though, because I'm not sure that they're like on the people that are riding EMS, would they like, are they allowed to come out and say like, oh yes, we made a mistake, or I mean,
we weren't there, so we don't know what.
But like, or like, I mean, I'm just wondering how much information we're gonna actually get from them in terms of whether or not they, like, the road is.
I think the only thing you can do is,
I mean, they definitely had to make more turns and navigate, right? Like, there's no question about that. They could not make a left onto Main Street to go up Old Shore Hills Road.
they couldn't go straight, right?
Or if they,
I'm
oh,
sure
sorry,
they couldn't
I
go
was
straight.
assuming they were coming up this way.
Yeah.
Even if they're going straight up,
Right.
they would have to make a right and make a left on Lackawanna. So like, there's no way that that could be the equal distance as going straight.
Yeah.
There's just no way.
Pardon me.
I think that what you can do is, and again,
And I just brought that up because I think I remember talking to someone that they're not allowed, like, someone I miss, I could be wrong, but I remember hearing something, they're not allowed to say that they did something wrong, like they can't. So I'm not sure, just, I mean, I think, you know, are we gonna have Brian and our police skill fitter and police chief skill fitter and chief Echeverria and Mr. Ross, right? The head of EMS?
Ross.
Thank you. Come in and like tell us, like, are they gonna stamp it? Like, this is fine, we are not, like, this is okay, like.
I think, and I'm again, this is obviously a difficult situation, and certainly what the family went through is a very difficult situation. And I think it's important to note that you can have some factual information, but you also, you know, in terms of time and different things like that, but what it comes down to is, and I don't think you're gonna get necessarily, because the way that it impacts a particular emergency service will differ between the three of them, of course, but also, you know, the way that it feels when you're in that situation as opposed to somebody responding to that situation is different as well. And so I think that if there's a desire for some additional information from the committee, I could certainly get some factual information. I don't know that you're going to get opinion or interviews or things like that, but you may be able to get some factual information on what occurred, to what extent that moves anything forward or doesn't. I don't know. I can't make that determination for the township, but it is a very difficult situation. So, I know.
And then I was happy to see about the American Legion. I think that's a great thing that they're doing, so I hope a lot of people get involved in that. And we mentioned to Ms. Urso that about the lot 14, so that's good, so she knows about that. Okay, that's it for me. Okay. Consent agenda resolutions. The Township Committee will now consider consent agenda resolutions. Are there any comments from the committee in regards to any items listed on the consent agenda?
I have a question about 23193, just the Taylor Pond dredging project. Is this the same one we've been talking about?
Finally.
What is the plan for that?
So the dredging of Taylor Park Pond will take place in late September and October. There's a specific time frame, back to the DEP permitting questions. There's a certain time frame that you're allowed to divert the water and dredge the silt from the pond. So this is the contract to get that company and make sure that we can obtain the permits in a timely fashion to be able to do that work. To mid-September to the beginning of November is the time frame that you have to be able to do that work.
Okay, and just because we're talking about Taylor Pond, in storm preparedness, what do we do for Taylor Pond?
So what we open up the bypass pipe at Taylor Pond and we drain the pond. So what this dredging will do, while it is fairly small in significance, but it does provide some capacity. And so this dredging will provide a little bit more capacity as you drain that. Once it fills, then it's, you know, that capacity is gone. But this is also just for better movement of the water in general, as well as you know, some aesthetic as well.
And when you, going back to the Army Corps discussion, you talked about Campbell's and Diamond and other areas. Were other areas the
Dry detention.
dry detention? So we're no longer, that the Orange Reservoir is not included in that.
The Orange Reservoir was originally part of the solutions. It was the consensus solution back in the first round with the Army Corps. However, the Army Corps will not permit any forecast-based release of water.
Right.
And so that is no longer a consideration.
So how did, for Diamond and Campbell's Pond though, or not, like, how would they do it there then? Or what, like?
It would be,
what-
it would be, again, the structure that's there and whether there's something that can be done with that particular structure to improve or to expand. There's not a whole, to be fair, there's not a whole lot of detail that came from them on all of this yet. They're just looking for detention, and I think more so they're looking.
Is detention a dam?
Detention can be a dam. It can also be, a dry detention, which means generally doesn't have water in it, but in the event of a storm, it would fill with water. So like Lenape, like Lenape Park down in Cranford, Kenilworth border is a dry detention area. It has earthen dikes around it and will collect water. So that's another location that they're also looking at, whether they can.
That
improve
wouldn't help
upon.
us.
No, but certainly anything upstream will improve Millburn's situation. But what I will say is they're taking a pretty holistic approach to the entire Rahway River Basin instead of just saying, well, you know, it's South Mountain or bust, or it's Cranford
The
or
Orange
bust.
Reservoir is out. And then so.
From the Army Corps.
From the Army Corps, but I'm so sorry about taking a little detour here, but I think it's really important. What happened with Mont McDonald? Wasn't that like, didn't you say that we're renewing?
Yeah, so that's a separate process.
Right.
Yeah,
And
looking
that's
at-
still going on?
Yes.
And, but did we already award him, that didn't happen.
No, that's gonna be on the 8/15 meeting to award an on-call contract to Mont McDonald to continue to
continue
assist.
looking at that project.
Correct.
And we're gonna talk about that then.
Correct.
But has Orange signed on yet? Like-
So where we are with Orange is that, and I think I've explained this, but if not, we are looking to do a bathymetric survey of the Orange Reservoir that will assist in solidifying the data that was done in the bypass study. And so the bathymetric survey is essentially the depth and contouring of the Orange Reservoir. And we've provided a access agreement to Orange to be able to take on that bathymetric survey. And so we're just waiting for their approval of that,
Which we don't have yet.
which we do not.
We're working on it. Got it. And they seem pretty positive about it. So we're very excited about that.
Okay, thanks.
May I have a motion to approve resolution 23-187 through resolution 23-196, which are listed on the consent agenda?
So, yeah, so, second.
Second, thank you. 197, it is 197 or 196, Christine?
197.
197, resolution 23-197, thank you, which are listed on the consent agenda.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Prupus?
Yes.
Ms. Romano?
Yes.
Mayor Miggins?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Cohen, you are scheduled to sponsor ordinance number 2645-23.
Yes. I would like to present an ordinance entitled Ordinance 2645-23, ordinance amending and supplementing the Township of Millburn Development Regulations and Zoning Ordinance. We talked about this, I guess, in terms of new business. These were a bunch of things coming from the planner and the zoning board, standardizing some definitions and basically bringing the zoning regulations in compliance. I guess Graham is on.
Mr. Petto is online. Good evening, Mr. Petto.
Good evening, Mayor Miggins, members of the Township Committee. Hope you're all well this evening. Thank you, Mr. Cohen, for introducing the ordinance pending before you this evening. The ordinance here before you this evening, we did discuss previously at the last meeting prior to introduction, but again, for the benefit of everyone in attendance this evening, this is an ordinance that was drafted by the Township's zoning subcommittee, zoning code examination subcommittee, and it's the ordinance before you seeks to add new definitional terms to the zoning chapter and also provide some amendments to the existing definitions in order to advance the master plan re-examination and update recommendation to promote clear, user-friendly, and transparent application review and public hearing processes for development proposals and applications. In the course of routine business, both by the Board of Adjustment and the zoning officer here at the Township, we've identified a couple of deficiencies within the Township zoning code, including lack of definition, for example, for the term basement. There is not presently a definition for that term within zoning, which is key, when you're evaluating plans and the like. So we've supplemented the zoning ordinance in this ordinance before you to incorporate those new definitions and also to provide some clarifying language as well. Happy to address any questions you may have. And just to also address Ms. Prupus's comment, we have prepared a supplemental PowerPoint slide deck that was included as part of the packet and will be posted and available for the public for inspection to review, in summary, generally the modifications that we are making. As this is an ordinance amendment to the development regulations and zoning chapter of the Township Code, this will be scheduled for master plan consistency review by the planning board as well. Happy to entertain any questions.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Petto?
Okay. I move that this ordinance be taken up and passed on first reading, and that the Township Clerk be authorized to have the ordinance published in accordance with the law in the item and for hearing and final passage on Tuesday, September 5th.
May I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Prupus?
Yes.
Ms. Romano?
Yes.
Mayor Miggins?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Romano, you are scheduled to sponsor ordinance 2646-23.
Thank you. I would like to present an ordinance entitled Ordinance 2646-23, ordinance amending and supplementing the Township of Millburn Development Regulations and Zoning Ordinance.
Mr. Petto?
Sure, happy to provide a general overview again. So the ordinance before you here this evening, this ordinance provides two different types of amendments to residential standards within zone districts here within the township. The first is with regard to number of stories for residential dwellings. Presently, the township code is silent and does not stipulate a maximum number of stories permitted within residential zones. There are maximum height provisions, however, there is no maximum number of stories provisions. So the ordinance before you this evening institutes a 2.5-story maximum. That's 2.5-story maximum height within residential zones, which is standard for 2 full stories and then a pitched roof with an attic story above. The second component of this ordinance before you this evening is to create some consistency and clarity for neighborhood context and character surrounding the front yard setback. Presently, the front yard setback broadly across most residential districts is a hard 40 feet. We've heard a number of comments from the Board of Adjustment in their annual report that they issue that the 40-foot front yard setback can be difficult to adjudicate for homeowners seeking to do small covered porch entries or other modifications to their dwelling. So the proposal here this evening is to calculate specific neighborhood context prevailing front yard setbacks upon which the regulations will apply. So homes generally are permitted modifications to the front of them that are in alignment with homes adjacent to either side of those dwellings. Again, to supplement this information, provide clarity for the public and the benefit of you all as well, we have prepared a slide deck that provides also some illustrative examples and lots of contextual information to help explain this process. And again, as I alluded to previously in the prior ordinance, as this is a development regulations and zoning ordinance modification, this again will be scheduled for referral to the planning board, at which we will conduct a master plan consistency review and also provide more information to the planning board on this as well. Happy to answer any questions you all may have.
Any questions, anyone?
I move that this ordinance be taken up and passed on first reading, and that the township clerk be authorized to have the ordinance published in accordance with law in the item and for hearing and final passage on Tuesday, September 5th, 2023.
May I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Prupus?
Yes.
Ms. Romano?
Yes.
Mayor Miggins?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Petto. Have a lovely evening.
Yeah.
Ms. Prupus, you're scheduled to sponsor ordinance 2641-23.
I present for consideration an ordinance entitled ordinance number 2641-23. Capital ordinance of the Township of Milburn in the County of Essex, New Jersey, authorizing the making of various public improvements and acquisitions in, by, and for the township, appropriating therefore the sum of $2,202,000 and providing that such sum of so appropriated shall be raised from the capital improvement fund of the township and from the township's capital reserve for police and capital reserve for DPW. Tonight is the time set for the public hearing and final passage as advertised in accordance with law.
I declare the hearing open.
Okay, I move that this public hearing be closed and an ordinance be adopted on final reading of the township clerk be directed to publish this ordinance by title as passed on final reading in accordance with law.
May I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Prupus?
Yes.
Ms. Romano?
Yes.
Mayor Miggins?
Yes.
Thank you.
Ordinance 2642-23. Mr. Cohen, you are scheduled to sponsor this, sir.
I present for consideration an ordinance entitled ordinance number 2642-23, bond ordinance to authorize the undertaking of various public improvements in, by, and for the Township of Milburn in the County of Essex, State of New Jersey, to appropriate the sum of $900,000 to pay the cost thereof, to make a down payment, to authorize the issuance of bonds, to finance such appropriation, and to provide for the issuance of bond anticipation notes in anticipation of the issuance of such bonds. Tonight is the time set for public hearing and final passage as advertised in accordance with law.
I declare the hearing open.
Good evening, my name is Jeffrey Feld, a Short Hills resident. I just like, give me time, because I have to create a record for what needs to be done. First, I believe in cosmic justice, because today, an obituary appeared in the New York Times. If you get a chance, this is about the professor who wrote the book on Bull. And there talks about lying and the art of Bull, and I don't want to say about that. Also, 2 public notices, one appeared today, one appeared Friday. One was prepared by our attorney, redevelopment counsel for Livingston. You need to compare the public notices for final compliance hearings. They differ dramatically from the notice that was issued in Essex County. The reason I'm saying this, Alex, because this bond, let's go by drafting. This is a bond ordinance. There's 2 projects. From the 4 corners of the ordinance, can you tell me how much is allocated for each project? Because you just approved a bond ordinance prior that you do specifically set forth the amounts for the projects. Is there a typo, I think in paragraph 3, when you do the simple math? Because 10% is gonna go for a down payment, and the balance is gonna go for the project. The projects, what are the projects? One project is Taylor Park, and the other one is the relocation of the DPW site. Now that takes us into certain questions. I think no one disputes, especially after the planning board hearing, that the public was never told the terms of the agreement prior to until after approval. In June 2021, there was a public forum where Mr. Mariziti and Mr. McDonald.
Mr. Felt, we're talking about this ordinance, sir.
I'm speaking, I'm creating a record, don't cut me off. I have to
Sir,
create a record.
as long as you're talking about ordinance
Yes, because
26.
one of the projects that you're doing is the relocation of DPW project. That's tied into the 75 unit affordable housing. And Mr. Cohn just told us about 10 minutes ago that RPM is not a for-profit entity. Because he said there's 2 ways you afford affordable housing if everyone's just sitting careful.
Mr. Felt, I'm up here,
I don't know where you are sometimes.
right here, right
Right,
looking
but
at you.
Do not interrupt me. Let me please make a record. All right? Because the issue is, was the public ever allowed to know or to make comment? Because there was a promise made by 2 gentlemen up here in June 2021 that the public would have input prior to your approval of anything on the DPW site. That never occurred. There's a breach of agreement. There's issues as the amount. We should know now, the public should know how much you're allocating for the Taylor Park project or how much you're applying to the relocation project, because that caps your numbers. There's an issue also as to effective date.
Thank you, Mr. Felt.
I'm gonna ask questions. You can't cut me off.
Okay.
Let him come, I'm just gonna ask these questions.
Let him-
But if you don't want to cut me off, it's
I'm
automatically.
suggesting that the mayor exercise some discretion on a public hearing on an ordinance to allow you to continue.
Also, there's questions of whether it should be 3 minutes or 5 minutes, because in North, they give you 5 minutes on an ordinance, and we only give us 3 minutes. So there's a question about equal protection. Now, the question about effective date, this is a bond ordinance. When is the effective date? And does the public have the right to get a petition to force a referendum on this issue? Because the public was never asked whether to approve this project. And then the question is, how many signatures do we need to have a referendum? Why don't we bifurcate this ordinance? Take the Taylor Park, which I think no one really disputes, about the 400,000, and then take the other piece, that being for the DPW relocation, and going to the public, your constituents, and asking if they want this project. We've never had that option. I said about effective date, and then there's a question, is the bond ordinance. Bond ordinances are a little different. How many affirmative votes are required to pass this? Is it a majority or is it a supermajority? These are issues that you need to know. But the issue that we have here is, I can tell you what Judge Kennedy said to me in 2010. Looking at the 4 corners of this ordinance, can you tell the allocation of the amounts? Is there a typo? You look at the 4 corners, not some other document, that it wasn't there. And you talked about the public. The public was never asked whether they wanted that project. You lied, you broke a promise. And I just recall, I call it cosmic justice, that there's an obituary today in the New York Times about the professor who sold a small book about on bullshit.
Yeah, you may, when we're finished. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Ben Stoller, Milburn resident, running for town council on the Republican ticket. Talking about the ordinance and the bond ordinance, I want to visit a couple comments that Mr. Cohn made earlier when he was discussing the 75 unit 9 Main Street project and how those finances, to me, it's obvious you don't understand how the economics of a pilot work, payment in lieu of taxes, and how that affects all the different areas. It is on the ordinance. If the $900,000 is going to the dump to relocate the dump, which I was told it was, correct? I hope I get my reclaim some time. But if the money's being bifurcated or spent on the dump and on the Taylor Park project, we should understand the finances of the entire project, I would think. Just simple financial analysis, we should understand what a pilot is, we should understand what the difference between a development at Annie says 80-20 by a private developer and what the pilot program is that you guys discussed earlier. And to me, it's obvious that we don't know the difference because no one's done that financial analysis, how it relates to moving the dump to wherever we move it to. That being said, what are the other costs associated that could fall into that bucket with moving the dump? So I just need to understand, I think we should all understand for the residents who pay taxes and keep this town afloat, who will be penalized by higher taxes if we don't understand the finances now. Everybody's going to be apoplectic if we don't get it right, and they're going to take it out. So why don't we do it the right way? Thank you.
I just had a couple questions. Is that okay to ask that?
On the ordinance?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, no, it was not really, so I was just wondering back to your comment about putting them together and, bifurcating them. It feels like, it'd be great to sort of isolate ordinances so they're not like obfuscated, like with, two different sort of issues and breaking them down because it's confusing. It seems like the Taylor Park is a no-brainer. I'm concerned just about the status of the 9 Main, and I find it extremely confusing. Like, I don't even know what the design plans are. Like, I've seen all the different drawings. Some of them look like a mental hospital in light blue. I don't know what's going on with that. And then there's all these issues open with the toxins and the plumes that are really unclear and aren't really sort of finalized in any way. And so to approve an amount of money, I guess, is confusing to me. So maybe I'm almost done. To approve an amount of money to go ahead and start a project and move the, the dump site or whatever you want to call it, over to, the JFK Parkway site prior to, like, this whole thing could just collapse in our hands. It seems like. I might be wrong, and maybe you could just advise me on that because I just don't really understand what's going on with it. I don't see a clear set of drawings. Are we really breaking ground in October? What's going on? Because it seems like we get these bits and pieces. So I would say that I would not vote for approving that. Obviously I'm not on the township committee, but that's just my comment. And maybe you could educate me, please, Ms. Miggins. I'd appreciate it because I'm unaware. And there's not a lot of writings on the actual ordinance. Thank you. You don't want to say anything right now? Okay. No,
When we're
thank you. I
finished
just
with
wanted to
public
ask.
comment.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andy.
Charles Bambara, Milburn Township resident. Just wanted to revisit my environmental concerns for the relocation of the dump and the DEP. To my knowledge, any industrial, commercial, and non-residential use does require proper environmental permits. It's not something you can just say, we don't need them. Okay, so that's the first thing as far as I know. Mr. McDonald, you made a statement that the focus was on the Woodland Housing Project, and you didn't focus much on the DPW. When I said about in addressing my concern, you said the focus was on the Woodland Housing Project, and you weren't focusing on the DPW, and yet you're talking about relocating the DPW to that site. So if you haven't focused on it, why are we voting on it? I mean, I think you need to focus on it because I think, the current dump site is polluted. So some assumptions should be made in the interest of caution. Even if, regulations have changed and some of the things you don't accept now that you used to accept. But in the interest of caution, I think that you have to consider the possibility that the DPW might be a polluter. So I submit, instead of giving tacit consideration, that you carefully study any environmental impacts that relocation of the DPW facility, including the municipal dump, may have on the adjacent water supply. And the last thing, Taylor Park, and everybody said that's a no-brainer. To me, it isn't quite a no-brainer because the dam is poorly designed. You've got a dam there that establishes a base water level for a storm surge. You've got a bypass valve that you open that lets the water down to some level. That's going to last 10 minutes in a storm surge. And you're going to fill it back up again. Dredging Taylor Park, that's fine. You're giving the fish more space to swim. That's all you're doing with that. You're not really solving anything. You can't have a bypass, you can't have an overflow dam because the storm surge gets added to that. And then it overflows and it backs up. So you've got to let the water pass the dam. And a fixed height dam without some kind of spillway to allow the water to divert in that application is incorrectly designed. So if you're going to play around with Taylor Park, look at the dam also.
Thank you, Mr. Barber.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. I think somebody has their hand up, Mr. Moore.
Hi, good evening, Terry Urso. So regarding the ordinance, I would like to just make the point that this municipality is filled with the most incredibly smart people within the community. And I really think that you're doing this municipality, this beautiful town, an injustice by not opening up the forum and letting people know what your intentions are. It's been brought to my attention, I will leave names out, but to my knowledge, that the testings haven't even been done throughout the entire DPW site. So I'm not even sure if that's something that you're going to carry through. We've heard from people in their 90s to say that what was going on at that DPW site. It's unfathomable. And just you learn and you hear about other municipalities doing something similar, but then the repercussions on human beings are so far more valuable than what you're considering to put at that DPW site. I can't even imagine. Ask yourself, would I put my families on that site? Would I even put my dog on that site? Am I opening up a volcano of chemicals that can really, really affect the surrounding areas and then going through the water lines, like Mr. Barbera had said? I think this really needs to be opened up to the public. I'm highly encouraging you to utilize your local access channel so you're more transparent and people know exactly what you are trying to do. You're doing this community an injustice. And Ms. Miggins, there's multiple times I've seen you when you were once on the other side of the dais, when you were against certain projects in town. And I think you need to take a few steps back and take a deep breath and absorb exactly what the repercussions are going to be, because actions have repercussions. And unfortunately, you're going to really, really, really affect the future of this township and people's health. And it's really, I can't even fathom that you're not even taking it into consideration. Have a nice evening. You might want to reconsider this.
Thank you, Ms. Urso. Okay. I think we're close on that, right?
And before I read the rest of it, I'd just like to, since he's creating a record, correct Mr. Feld. I never said that RPM was a nonprofit. Okay. You'd like to go ahead.
Are you going to close public comments first?
May I?
Yes, you can do that.
I will close public comments.
Thank you. Okay. So I did want to make a couple of comments, and one of them is with respect to the opportunity for the public to be involved in the new project at the DPW site. I understand, although I wasn't part of it, that there was quite a significant outreach to the public that was conducted by Topology through Graham Petto some time ago, where hundreds of comments were received by the Township Committee with respect to the design of the project that will be built on the site. The redevelopment agreement will specifically identify exactly what is going to be on the site. And that is a document that is in negotiation as we speak. The comments that are raised with respect to the DPW site and the 100% affordable project are premised on a false premise, which is that the township has a choice. Township does not have a choice about that project. It's a matter of a court order. There's a court order that has been issued as a result of the follow-up on the obligations from the settlement agreement. There was a hearing on a compliance with respect to that settlement agreement. There is conditional approval by the court of the order of repose, which would protect the township from the builder's remedy options that I talked about. And the order requires that the township undertake the development of the preparation and adoption of a redevelopment plan, which has been done, and that the township is required to enter into a redevelopment agreement to provide for the construction of the facility. That is required by an order of the court. So there's the conversations about the alternatives about this are misplaced. There's no choice. It must go forward. The question has been raised about I was responding to a question earlier about an environmental impact statement. That's what I was addressing. I certainly agree that a permit may be required. That's a different document. I want to make that distinction. And certainly there is an estoppel period with respect to a bond ordinance. There are opportunities for challenges to a bond ordinance. 4 votes will be required to adopt it. I think that covers the issues that I thought should be responded to.
I would also just like to respond to a few items. One is that when this ordinance came up for introduction, it was explained that $300,000, as was discussed at the Township Committee late last year, is being allocated to Taylor Park, and that is for the gateway entrance and for improvements to that portion of Taylor Park. It was also explained that $600,000 would be allocated toward the relocation of Public Works. And that $600,000 is for potentially the relocation of the salt dome, the putting in of geotechnical firming of the compost site, as well as pavement and a concrete pad to be able to put the convenience center at that location. Now, I recall quite a little bit of time ago that one of the concerns from the public was we weren't thinking about the relocation of DPW and that we weren't prepared for it. And so this particular bond is the authorization of funds. It is not the issuance of actual funding. So the committee approves the bond tonight. It is a $600,000 authorization for the relocation of Public Works. Now, that money is then used at the time that you are doing that work. And I think that whether I did or I did not explain it previously, this is to be prepared in the event and when we have to do a relocation of Public Works. Certainly, as I had mentioned before, the focus right now is based on the development, the 75 units, what needs to be done with regard to RPM and the settlement agreement in that site. But that does not mean that the township shouldn't be prepared for the relocation of a portion of the DPW site. And that's what this bond is doing. And I know that in the previous meeting when this was introduced, I explained the amounts and what they were being used for, so that it was clear to the public.
Why are you doing them together?
Because we always do two ordinances when it comes to the budget. We do a capital ordinance, which is the cash funding, fully funded ordinance from the capital improvement fund. And then this year's example, also from reserves that were placed for public works, as well as.
That wasn't the question. I think she.
Yeah, I'm answering the
He's gonna
question.
get there.
I'm answering the question.
He's gonna get there.
Please.
And we do a bond ordinance, which is any of the funding, any of the projects that we need to fund that are not funded with cash or from the capital improvement fund. And those bond ordinances generally include multiple projects within them, whether it's a DOT project and a sanitary sewer pump station and different things like that, as we've done in the past. Sometimes it can include up to 4 projects within that bond ordinance.
But why wasn't Taylor Park put in to just the capital improvements?
Because, and just for some of the thought process behind this is that, you know, when we're allocating cash, when it comes to the capital fund, these are projects that we intend to do. Like, we know we're going to do. We have to order equipment. We have to make sure that we're doing a particular road, project or whatever it is. You're going to do. These projects may have to sit for a little bit. Taylor Park, you have to design it. You might have to wait a little bit. You're going to be sitting on. So you don't necessarily allocate the cash and take out your cash at that point in time. So that is why some projects are put through a bond ordinance and some are put into a capital ordinance.
So the bond is the capital is when you need cash right away, and the bond is just authorizing to get the cash at another time.
Correct. And just one more point on the site. Now, some people may not be recollect, but we had done an entire study of the relocation of the DPW site and to the JFK site. And a environmental engineering company came and looked at the JFK site and determined the buildable area there. It's an about 11-acre site that the township owns up there, and is about a 5-acre buildable area based on various different restrictions or boundary lines or whatever it may be up there. And that is available on the township's website.
Anybody else?
Okay, so we've closed public comment. I move that the ordinance be adopted on final reading and that the township clerk be directed to publish the ordinance by title as passed on final reading in accordance with law.
May I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Lucas?
I think that these should be separate ordinances, and I'm voting no.
Ms. Romano?
Yes.
Mayor Miggins?
Yes. I'm scheduled to sponsor, excuse me, folks.
So if it doesn't pass, and hopefully they'll be separated at the next meeting.
I present for consideration an ordinance entitled ordinance number 2643-23, ordinance repealing and replacing chapter 14 of the revised general ordinances of the Township of Milburn entitled Solid Waste Management. I guess I should, do you want to wait? Do you want to open it first?
Yeah.
Tonight is the time set for the public hearing and final passage as advertised in accordance with law. I declare the hearing open.
Jeffrey Feld, a Short Hills resident. I think we should go back to understand the history of this whole concept. It started in January when businesses received a letter saying that they had till the end of February to get private contractor. Then you amended it to give until the May 31st. But I stood up here earlier in the year and told you the first thing you had to do was to amend the ordinance. And the question is accountability. Who gave the advice that you could have done this throughout this whole year? There's an ordinance here. It's interesting when you look at the packet. When Graham was talking about the ordinances for zoning, he gives you a black line copy. There's no black line copy for the amendments of this ordinance. I've requested it when you had your new business requirement. You said you had black line copies. I made open request for the black line copies. I did not receive it. I sent you a copy of an opinion because one of the issues we have today is about the uniformity clause. Because when I started speaking to you in, let's say, January and February, I told you that the apartment owners under state statute would get reimbursement for some of the costs because they're paying taxes and you're not giving them the service and you get reimbursement. When I mentioned that, you all looked at me like I had horns on my head. I sent you an opinion that came out from the, I believe it was the Superior Court of Tax Court regarding reverse tax appeals. We have to look at our state constitution about the uniformity clause. The question is, are the commercial owners who pay taxes, are they being treated equally or are they being distinguished? I suggest that you take a pause and get an opinion, not from Mr. Marizzi, but I get it from your tax attorney, your tax bill attorney, John Lloyd, I believe is his name, because he's a good attorney and he might be able to examine the uniformity clause. Now, the reason I say that because you've been getting conflicting advice about, for the last few years, about what you can do, but I think this is something that's so important that you might want to get a written opinion whether this ordinance that you're proposing to do violates the uniformity clause of the state constitution.
So I don't normally pay a lot of attention to the ordinances because I'm very focused on 5G, as you know. And I just want to throw out a suggestion that would be really helpful is maybe to, on your list that you put out the ordinance, to actually describe what it is. So you don't have to go through the buried links through the website. So which, you know, I was just pulling up. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this, and again, you might answer my questions, is it appears that it's about non-residential, but then they talk about they throw in the word residential in here. And so I wanted to understand, are you updating the entire code, including residential? Because if that's the case, I would like to make a couple of comments, so they may not be relevant. You'll tell me that later after I say this. For 20, I don't know, almost 27 years, I can't remember, it's close to that. I've had my trash picked up, as many residents in the Deerfield area, between 6:30. I've seen them come sometimes as early as 5:55 in the morning, 2 days a week, Saturdays and Wednesdays. And then recycling was on Saturday mornings. And then, so it's really invasive. You know, we pay a lot of taxes in this town to wake up early when, you know, people are on different schedules. It's not a reasonable amount of time. It's not a reasonable time to wake up early in the morning. And now the township has decided to give us 3 days of that, which is really, again, it's like, so now, like, I don't know what 3 out of 7 is. What is it? Close to 40%. I'm too tired to do math right now, but, that's a lot of time to be waking up early, and sleep's really important for everybody's health. And I've just conquered cancer naturally, and I definitely don't want to get it again, and I don't want to get my sleep. So lots of people in my neighborhood are actually upset about it. So people don't always come down and talk to you guys, but I really think it's unreasonable to have garbage collection that early in the morning. So if you guys are rehabbing this whole thing, I'd really appreciate you to take a look at that. It would mean a lot to a lot of people, because it's also not equitable, because there's lots of people in this town who've been sitting in other sections of the town that the little garbage man that comes to my house at 6 o'clock in the morning or 6:15, wherever he feels like it, then goes over to like Beechcroft and maybe they make it there by 7. I don't know. I don't know how it's structured, but I do know that it's not equitable when somebody can live for 26 years and get a 9 o'clock a.m. and not have a wake up call. And you know, that's just my opinion. So I just want to throw it out. Thank you. Not ridiculously. I'm a resident of these houses. And they don't start now.
Anybody for comments? We have one more. Sideways. Okay, hold on a second. Ms. Urso, hold on 1 second. We don't hear you, my friend. Hold on, Ms. Urso. We cannot hear you.
Okay, got me now?
Now we can hear you. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Technology. Okay, so about the solid waste ordinance. So to be honest with you, I never got involved since the township committees, and I didn't even know who I could talk to since 2020. I've learned so much in 3 years. So since 2020, I now have some new taxes. We have the assessment, the special improvement district assessment. Coincidentally, I just got an estimated tax bill that has gone up, but my services have gone down. So it's concerning as a commercial property owner, whether it's mixed use or not, but what other tax and what other changes are you guys going to put on the table? Because as a property owner, a landlord, a merchant, you're really starting to debilitate people to even functioning at a normal level, even with today's climate. Since we had our restaurant, we abided by our resolution and we had private scavenge. So we built it into our capital and our budget on our business plan. And we factored those prices in. However, I have leases that are in place that my tenants have not factored those in. So what you haven't done is really come to, I think, a better resource, because I mean, back adjacent to lot 14, you have, let's see, 3, 4, 8, maybe 8 or 9, even 10 businesses from Short Hills Avenue on Jarvis Lane to the private entry at 518. And majority of the people are either going to get a private scavenge that they can afford. So we're going to have multiple garbage companies in at different times. So my two questions are, why is it the contract that you have with Giordano ties their hands to have the individuals, because now you're giving us a choice, because you've taken our services away as merchants, but why have you debilitated Giordano to unable in their contract to pick up anyone else's garbage? I mean, that would eliminate a lot of extra trucks coming in and out. My next question is, a few months back, because this has been going on since January and the dates keep changing, but here we are on the eve of the change. Coincidentally, each merchant that I know of were all solicited by the same company. How did one company know to solicit the merchants throughout Milburn Township? How did they know that we were going to have an ordinance change and one company did all the solicitation? So hopefully you can answer that question before you vote on this evening. And I think you're just, again, you're going to cause some mayhem and more garbage containers all over. And what kind of planning did you do? Aesthetically, do we know what this is going to actually look like behind commercial properties? So maybe before you even vote on this tonight, you can elaborate and say who actually pounded the pavement, walked the neighborhoods, walked the main streets, walked behind buildings, and tell me what that's going to look like. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms.
And thanks for the additional tax.
Thanks, Ms. Ursa. Anyone else? No, I'll declare the hearing closed. Any comments?
First and foremost, to address Ms. Urso's comments, I don't know who solicited the businesses. However, as Mr. Feld had pointed out, this has been going on since January and letters were sent out. So I'm assuming that a company had the foresight to then start soliciting businesses, or people talk and they say, I'm not sure what the implication there was, but I'm sure that it happened through a natural process. As far as the issue with regard to, this has nothing to do with residential pickup. With the exception of that residents are required to put garbage in a container. And that is very clearly spelled out here, and that you will not put, that it is not going to be permitted to have plastic bags or garbage bags on the street. And that they need to be placed in a container that has a lid that can be protected from animals and blowing around or being cut into or whatever it might be. And also that is an aesthetic improvement. I think Mr. Feld had brought up the idea that, and certainly I'm not an attorney, but I do understand that there is a statute when it comes to multifamily residential. There's a statute when it comes to the municipal reimbursement. There is not a statute when it comes to commercial properties. And that is something that if commercial properties feel strongly about that, then that is something they should just discuss from a legislative level. This ordinance is a repeal and replace. It is a complete overhaul of the current Chapter 14 ordinance, has new definitions. Again, to Ms. Best's point, the ordinance has a statement of purpose and the reason for its being considered. I think that this will address some inequities. I think I had heard that earlier. This will address some inequities about how some businesses are paying for commercial garbage collection on their own, while some are not. And the majority are paying for it on their own. And those businesses that were not rolled over through the planning board process, or as a result of changing hands, or naturally being addressed by the municipality, they will now be addressed, and those commercial properties will have to have private collection. I think that addresses some of the points that were brought. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
So the taxpayers were paying for it, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's a taxpayer, but the fact is that commercial, there is a degree of it's a cost of doing business, and there is nothing in the statute that says, and you can go around to almost every municipality and ask, I mean, I think with the exception of Union, whether they are picked up by the municipality, and they're not, they're picked up privately. And so I think that the other point that was asked about why we're tying Giordano's hands is that there is no ability for us then to discern whether the garbage they're picking up is our tonnage or commercial tonnage. And so they are not permitted to contract commercially. And that is a decision that they will eventually have to make as to whether it's more beneficial for them to be a contractor of the municipality, or to go out to private businesses and contract with them, as other companies have done, whether it's Waste Industries or, and you see not a lot of people are in the municipal business collection.
And you didn't say it this time, but you said it before, the reason we care whose garbage it is because there's landfill fees that are based on weight. And therefore, if it's a mixture, we don't know how to allocate that.
Correct.
Is it conceivable like it used to be?
Ms. Prupus, anything? Ms. Romano?
Isn't our ordinance that we could put our trash out the night before?
Yes.
Thank you.
And what time?
So you,
6 hours, 7.
it's you can put it out at 7 o'clock the night before. There's no, garbage companies do work early. I haven't heard this complaint before, but I'm happy to look into why they're coming into certain neighborhoods at 6 o'clock. Usually what they do is they tackle commercial districts, or they tackle.
I can validate that. They come around 6
Yeah,
o'clock.
and they work early. They work early.
They work early, certainly in the summer. I certainly wouldn't want to be out in the 92-degree weather picking up garbage, and that's what I always assume why they come out so early in the morning.
And
So you can put it out the night before.
Yeah, and I will point out that when it was in-house, they also started at 6 o'clock in the morning.
And just the cans, they're supposed to come back in early the next day, and they're not supposed to sit outside all day, and they're not supposed to sit in front of the homes. Is that
It
correct?
depends, because some people go to work early before.
However, they're not supposed to sit in front of homes, in the garage, in the driveways during the week.
I would have to verify, but it was my understanding that the ordinance stated that they should not be visible from the street.
Not visible from the street.
But just to point out another thing, you know, and I saw this firsthand this morning as I was following the garbage truck in town, that if residents put out recyclables in a plastic bag, they will not take it. They will not pick it up. It is contamination.
They take them.
I just watched them skip 5 houses, so.
Okay.
Well, don't put them in plastic bags because that's
Mr.
not the right thing
Mariziti,
to do.
did you have something you wanted to say?
I do. My garbage is picked up like clockwork at 5 minutes of 6. I don't have to set my clock. I don't live in Milburn, but it's the same thing. And sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't. That's not what I'm going to talk about, though. I wanted to address Mr. Feld's question about constitutionality of the issue with respect to the uniformity clause. And I looked into that when this came across my desk, and I learned exactly what Alex talked about. There's a specific state statute on this. I looked into the legislative history of it. It doesn't talk about commercial. It is only addressing residential with respect to this reimbursement. So the state legislature mandated this. And in order to object to that, you have to challenge the constitutionality of that state statute. That's what's at stake here, not the constitutionality of this ordinance. And of course, the legislature can make distinctions like that. This is not taxation, which is what the uniformity clause deals with. As you mentioned, the tax court dealt with that. It's a tax court issue. The legislature, in its wisdom, knowing the Constitution and knowing the uniformity clause, has adopted this ordinance a long time ago. It's not a new ordinance, a statute. Legislature adopted the statute many years ago. So I have no hesitation of giving you the advice that this is legally appropriate for the, not only appropriate, but required for the township to do. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, so I move that the ordinance be adopted on final reading and that the township clerk be directed to publish the ordinance by title as passed on final reading in accordance with law. May I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Prupus?
Yes.
Ms. Romano?
Yes.
Mayor Miggins?
Yes.
Thank you.
We have no old business to discuss, but we do have new business to discuss. So Ms. Prupus, you wanted to speak about green development proposed regulation.
Sure, so Priya Patel, who's on the Environmental Commission, brought this to our attention, that Livingston passed a green development regulations for redevelopment projects. So Councilman Klein, Sean Klein, said that he would come to the next meeting to discuss it if you're all interested in hearing about it. And yeah, I don't know if you got a chance to read it. It was in the packet what they're doing, but it might be something that we want to consider as a township committee.
We have the chairman of the Environmental Commission here this evening, Mr. Timpson. Mr. Timpson, did you want to make a comment about this? I know it's our business, but I know that was it something that you had discussed at your last Environmental Commission meeting? Sorry, don't mean to put you on the spot.
That's all right.
Thank you.
Wouldn't be the first time.
Yeah. Thanks, I think.
This is not ringing a bell. We didn't have anybody come to make a
Okay, then, okay, so,
presentation to us.
okay.
Love to hear
so-
whatever it is.
Yeah, Livingston passed it, and the Councilman Klein, who brought it through Livingston, has offered to come to the next meeting to talk to us about it.
My feeling is before we hear about it, I think the Environmental Commission should hear about it first and see if it's something that that's just my opinion. See if they,
I couldn't agree more. I know my counterpart in Livingston, and I would like to not only.
Great, awesome,
Right.
run with it,
I'll follow up on
Sounds
all
great.
those things.
awesome.
and
Thank
then you can report back
Sounds
to
good.
us.
So
and-
I'll tell
Yes.
Sean that not to come to the next meeting, and if you're interested, you can reach out to him.
Yeah, what's his name?
Sean Klein,
Sean Klein is a
he's a
councilman.
councilman
Hard
in,
name, lots of syllables.
in Livingston.
Okay,
Okay, so
Awesome.
that would be great.
Yeah, I will
Done.
follow up.
Thank you, sir.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much. Mr. McDonald, I am going to refer to you for committee consideration and discussion. Police Department personnel.
So I've recently had some conversations with members of the Township Committee. And there was a desire to at least have a discussion about the potential for, as we had done a study back in 2020 that suggested the addition of 6 police officers to the table of organization. At that time, we did increase the table of organization by 4 to 58. What we left off at that time was 2 additional police officers to form a community policing unit. I think what we found over the last few years is that there's a growing need and a growing desire for more interaction with the police department. It's something that you see in other communities quite a bit, actually. And there is a desire from the police department to address this deficiency, I think, in their table of organization. So I wanted to pose it to the Township Committee as to whether there would be consensus to again increase the table of organization of the Melbourne Police Department to 60, which would establish a community policing unit. We've already kind of taken a first step in that by looking at a civilian position that would work on public information and communications, as well as data analysis of the police department, which I think again is another growing concern and desire and need with modern police departments. And so just wanted to offer up that bit of information, as well as the report that had been done back in 2020, sort of suggesting what a community policing might look like, as well as expressing that the Melbourne Police Department also has that same desire to have more interaction with the public in that way. So happy to answer any questions or
So
hear
what
from
does it look like?
So a community policing unit essentially does the public outreach, right? They're the ones that would do coffee with the cop, go to the schools, interact with the children, start a junior police academy, make sure that they're interacting with promoting programs that they already have, like Project Lifesaver and Coffee with a Cop, which was done back in 2019 and then not done throughout the pandemic, and then stopped afterward. Making sure that there's more positive sort of, when I say positive interactions, but also less necessarily just about police work, but more about community, ensuring that they're going, talking to businesses and interacting with businesses and welcoming new businesses in. And there's a whole host of things that I think that we are lacking, because quite frankly, we have a fairly good, a fairly large police department in terms of 58 officers, but a lot of that, we have a detective bureau that is busy with other things. We have a traffic bureau. So I think having this community policing unit allows us to have members that are focused on that particular task, rather than trying to fit it into everything else that's being done.
Would they have any involvement with like a neighborhood watch?
Yeah, I think they would. I think they would. I think it would still, they'd still probably utilize some of the detectives that are currently helping out. But yes, I think, the idea of a neighborhood watch is that you're providing support to a group of people that are looking out for themselves in their neighborhood. And this is a perfect sort of interaction.
But if you wanted to organize one in your neighborhood that didn't exist, these would be the people that you might call to help get that started.
Correct. Yep. And to be clear is that they wouldn't necessarily, this wouldn't be a 9 to 5 job. This would be something that would be a little bit more flexible in that, some events take place at night. Sometimes they take place on weekend. It wouldn't be something where, oh, well, they're just here from 9 to 5 and they can't go to that event because that's already been sort of discussed and understood. So.
If, like last week, we had 3 police officers hurt, right? So would they be able to then step into the role of the police, if we get in a pickle, would they be able to then just pick up and start, doing whatever it is, patrols or whatever the police officers do? Would they be trained in that as well?
Well, they would be full-blown police officers.
Okay.
Yeah, they would add to your table of organization, so they could be utilized for, say, a patrol or a detail or whatever it is, but their main focus would be on community policing.
And to your point, Michael, of the neighborhood watch, we're starting to form them. We have one that was formed in the Poets. We have one that's forming in South Mountain. We have one that West Hobart Gap. So there's different people that we're trying to, it can't just be one person. It has to be a whole group of people in order to do that. I think back in the 90s, maybe 80s, 90s, we had neighborhood watches. You'll see the old signs throughout town. And so we are, if anyone is interested in something like that, do let us know in the town, because we know they are forming in different neighborhoods, and we think it's a great community thing to do, by the way. So I personally would be all for that. The police department personnel. Ms. Romano?
I think with the addition of new residents that are going to be coming to town, I think it's important that we have more of a police presence in the town. In the downtown, the children, when they get out of school on Friday afternoon, the downtown is flooded with kids. It would be nice to have an officer walking around, and not that I want to jump ahead, but I have started to see some consistency with enforcement downtown and police just walking, and I think it's great.
Ms. Prupus, you're good for it? Mr. Cullen? Okay, we're good. Can you make that happen? Thank you. Parking enforcement meter feeding, Ms. Romano.
Again, like I said, for the past couple weekends, I guess, I have seen more of a consistency with enforcement downtown. I've seen police officers driving, I've seen police officers walking, just getting people to just move along and just stop throwing their hazards on wherever they see fit to run into, or wherever they need to go. I also just wanted to talk about the possibility of changing our enforcement with meter feeding. Because I see the same cars parked on Milburn Avenue day after day when I come through. Upper Milburn Avenue, downtown, same cars. So I'm assuming that those are the store owners or the merchants, and why you would take spots away from your customers, I'll never understand, but I do see it happening. And is there anything that we can do besides just ticketing them if they're repeat offenders?
So yes, couple thoughts, and just to go back to the point about the double parking. That has been a targeted enforcement. Again, if somebody's in their vehicle, they just move them along. But if that individual is not in their vehicle, we've been giving out at least 2 to 3 tickets a day for double parking, as well as moving everybody along. It does seem to be having some positive effect. As far as meter feeding, it is a very difficult topic, but I think there are avenues of approach that we can investigate, one of which is escalated penalties for parking over time limits and different offenses when it comes to parking. That I understand other communities are doing that. That is something that can be looked into and investigated. There's a new term that I've learned, which is called meter jumping, which I'm trying to find out a little bit more about. And that is, I'm like, it's, you're sitting in one spot and then you go up 3 spots. And so you moved your car, but you're still in the same area and you're still, and there's some difficulty in that. None of that is very clear cut to me yet. And having looked at you know, other towns and what they're doing. I think the other thing, and we have discussed this briefly in the parking ad hoc, but is making the business permit process a little bit easier, maybe a little bit more flexible, maybe a little bit, you know, less costly to incentivize people to get off the street if they are parking in front of their business, or if they are taking up spots from shoppers. So those are some solutions I think that we can look at to address the meter feeding, but I think that will just take a little bit of time, and I know Ms. Romano is on our parking ad hoc, so we can maybe address that further in that arena and bring something back to the committee for recommendation to address it fully.
We don't have any rules around, you know, if you got your 10th ticket for a meter feeding, that you're gonna get towed.
Not to my knowledge. You know, certainly if you've got your 10th ticket, you didn't pay the first 9, you're gonna get the towed, but
As long as you pay, just keep paying.
yeah.
I think
they're-
Summit does. I
they
think
do
what
escalate.
Summit does an escalating ticket.
Right.
So you just do it once and it continues. It's not pretty.
The backfire on that a little bit is that you may have people that do actually frequent your downtown, and they may, you know, find themselves in a position where, you know, and how do you do that? Is it in a particular day or is it in a month? So if somebody gets a ticket in the same month, and now instead of a $30 ticket, they're getting a $50 ticket, but they're just a normal shopper, you know, I mean.
Tell them to get a shopping parking.
That's it,
pass.
exactly. I have to tell you, I have a shopper parking pass. I don't even I don't even know my
Best
license
thing
plate
ever.
number, and I just park and I don't have to worry about it. And it's $60 for the year. It is the best thing in the world. And just so you know, the town gets to keep the whole $60. When we use the parking kiosks, that company takes a percentage of every amount of money that goes in them. So it would benefit the town to have the.
I didn't even know you have that.
Great idea.
We've announced it a
Oh,
few
we've had
times.
it for years. We've had it for years.
Great idea.
Yeah.
We put it on the website. We'll put it back again, and we'll continue to post it. But it's the best thing in the world. $60,
Follow us on social media.
and you'll see something. We have. Okay, so we're gonna look into that. You're gonna look into that through PSAP. And Mr. Cohen, you wanted to talk
I
about rent
did.
control.
I know. Okay, so I've heard, and I think some of us have heard, various complaints from from people primarily at the Upton, to say where it is, of getting what they would describe as unconscionable rent increases. In many cases, these were people who were to move to the Upton with various incentives like a few months free rent or whatever, but now those leases are over and, you know, the piper is coming to you know, pay the piper. So people are upset, you know, they made decisions to move there based on a certain rent and they didn't expect it to go up nearly as much as they did. And the people who have complained to me have been senior citizens. I wouldn't say that it's confined to them. I don't know that. I talked to Alex about, you know, someone was asking for help, what is it that we could do? And what I was told is without a rent control ordinance, there really wasn't anything that we could do. So I wanted to, you know, Alex did some research for me, I appreciate that, and found that there were some towns similar to ours. The one that comes to mind is Verona, also Montclair, but I think Verona is closer to us in many respects. Where they do have rent control, and it would only apply to multifamily developments, you know, the 5 or more, wouldn't apply to somebody renting out their house as you know, or whatever, or any of that kind of stuff. But, and you know, there are various things that you would need to do. You would need to have a rent control board that would set limits on rent increases. And I wanted to gauge the committee's approval or interest as to whether this is something that merits further study.
Do we know how much the rents were raised?
I've heard as much as 20%.
20%. So if you're paying $5,000, your rents went up $1,000 for the year. If you're paying $6,000, so 12, so that's a lot of money. And is that in addition to the Upton, or do we know if there's any other complexes that are raising their rents that exorbitantly?
I can't say definitively, but in the past, we have gotten complaints from residents in the Woodland Road garden
Complex.
apartments, yes.
Boy, what has the township ever looked into this before? I mean, because we do have rental properties throughout the township. Has there ever been anything, and what do we know?
Yes. It was done in, was it 1987?
87.
And, you know, people were making similar complaints, but the township committee of that day decided that a rent control ordinance was not required. You know, and I could understand that at the time. There were some rental apartments, but now we're going to see a whole lot more from all those 80. It would not apply to the affordable units, so, you know, that's a whole other thing, but it would apply to the 80% market rate units in the new developments. So, and we'll have a lot more apartments where you could see, you know, where all of a sudden the need is there. You know, people make decisions to move. They, you know, in the case of the Upton, the people that spoke to me, you know, they sold their house, they wanted to stay in town. That's what we're encouraging. There's the whole Stay New Jersey thing that will help people who are over 65 with their property taxes if they're owners, but it does very little for people that are renters. I think it's capped at like $700 a year, which is pretty minimal. So, and all of a sudden we have a lot more apartments, or will, and we want to encourage people to remain in town. And, you know, if people make decisions, and then it's not so easy to just pick up and move 2 years later, especially when you're older.
How did Ms. Prupus, how do you feel about this, to look into this?
I don't know how I feel about this. I don't know how I feel about it. I don't know what it would mean to look into it. What does that mean? What does looking into it mean?
Well, I mean, one, you know, certainly we've provided some examples of towns surrounding Milburn, but I think it would be beneficial to have someone perhaps take a more in-depth look at what is currently happening in the rental market in Milburn. This is a very similar process that took place in 1987, is to really look at what's happening. Because certainly, not discounting anything anybody's ever told us or complained to us about, but sometimes that is, you know, a particular situation, or there could be other things happening, or anecdotally, but having a more comprehensive look at what's happening, not just the Upton, but other garden apartments and apartments that are located in the township may have some benefit to better understand what the problem is and exactly how to address it.
Is there a way to find out for, I guess, how many complexes do we have in the town? 6? More than 6, 10? Is there a way to find out what their vacancy rates are like? Is there a way to find out what their rent prices have been?
The Upton, which is doing that, has very high vacancy rates according to the same people.
So they have high vacancy rates.
And yet, you know, they could very likely be encouraging higher vacancy rates if those people can't afford their rent increases.
And then they probably get to depreciate them.
Or come back and look for a property tax.
Look for a property tax abate, or for assessments to be, yeah, that's interesting, to look for, we can't rent our units, so can you lower our property
But it
assessment?
works the same, I think it works the same way in terms of whether, if you're controlling the rents too, it's a smaller revenue stream, and so they could ask for, you know, could be a very similar conversation. That's why I think it's, you know, it'd be important to understand what the pros and cons of that are.
What did they do in 87? How did they approach it?
They did a study. They looked at the study, and there were a few recommendations from that study. But one thing that they did not advance is creating a rent control ordinance.
So it's now 23. A lot of time has lapsed. Maybe we could look to do a study again.
Do
And
we have to pay for this study?
we do,
Yeah.
but it'd probably be easier than doing.
I mean, I can look at.
Who does that? Who do you pay to do the
Well,
study? And how much does it cost?
I do not have any experience with that, but can certainly look at that and at least report back to the township.
Why don't we do that? Why don't you find out who would do it, what the cost would be associated with it, and then we can discuss it in August meeting.
That's great.
Does that sound fair?
And just to add to that, and we
Yep.
had, but and we had sent it to those residents that complained, there are documents on the DCA's website that talk about unconscionable rent increases and things like that. But without the state having a statute for rent control, it is up to the local municipalities.
And so Verona has one and Montclair has one.
And that's some of the urban cities. but-
I think
Some
a whole
urban
bunch-
cities, and New Jersey as a whole does not have one.
Correct.
They're not allowed to.
They're not allowed.
They're not allowed to. It's ordered in.
Okay.
Okay, but
Another-
hold on, after we'll do it.
Yeah.
May I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? May I have a second? All those in